Saturated fat. A lot of people ask me about it. Leave comments on the videos asking my opinions on saturated fat, if I think it's dangerous, my thoughts on the link, supposedly, between cardiovascular disease and saturated fat, and cholesterol and cardiovascular disease, dietary cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. So, want to make a video about it? Go ahead and clear the air and let you know my thoughts and what my research has led me to believe about saturated fat as a nutrient, the most demonized and bastardized nutrient, and why I think it's important that we don't make the same mistakes and demonize carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are not inherently bad. The problem isn't all carbohydrates. Eating a few pieces of fruit is not going to give you cardiovascular disease, just like eating a little bit of saturated fat isn't going to give you heart disease and make you obese. So, let's just jump right into it and start with the history of the demonization and the bastardization of saturated fat. Researchers found back in the day, back in like 1957, 58, that eating saturated fat in some people could increase blood cholesterol, serum cholesterol levels. Now, it's actually, what we know now is that cholesterol levels in a small percentage of the population are increased with increased dietary saturated fat, but it's a specific type of cholesterol that is benign. There are two types of LDL, two types of low-density lipoproteins. There is small dense LDL, and there is large LDL. Now, large LDL is mostly benign. It is known to not influence cardiovascular disease, or rather, let me rephrase that. It is known that it is not correlated with incidences of cardiovascular disease, but the small dense LDL, which has recently been shown to be more closely tied to carbohydrate consumption. I'm not trying to demonize carbs, I'm just saying what my research has shown. The small dense LDL can penetrate the arterial wall and often is present when there's cardiovascular disease. That doesn't mean that the small dense LDL is creating the problem. It just means that it's present, that there is a little correlation between cardiovascular disease and this type of LDL. But that type of LDL, which is present in cardiovascular disease, is not increased by increased dietary saturated fat and cholesterol. So that's what we know now. Back then, they didn't know that. And they assumed that cholesterol caused cardiovascular disease. And that can be really dangerous. I've got my notes here, my old school handwritten paleo style notes. So this guy Ansel Keys really spearheaded this move to demonize saturated fat. And this ended up resulting in public policy change. So this one dude who had a hypothesis and who had a magnetic personality was able to speak, was able to influence people, was able to demonize his opponents very well using propaganda techniques and words and language in the media. This one guy was able to spearhead public policy changes. Pretty amazing, right? So back in 1977, a Senate committee led by George McGovern published the dietary goals for the United States. This was done with the intention, supposedly, to decrease the incidences of heart disease. Heart disease was an epidemic back then. Still is. Still is an epidemic. Nothing's changed. So, we'll get into that later, though. The dietary goals for the United States put forward that we should eat less dietary fat. We should eat less, mainly saturated fat from animal sources, and replace those saturated fats, the dietary fats that we do eat, with vegetable oils. Vegetable oils, highly, highly profitable, highly inflammatory, and something that I think it is very beneficial to avoid in your diet. So, saturated fat was replaced with vegetable fat, polyunsaturated fatty acids, trans fats, processed foods, processed carbohydrates. The dietary guidelines actually recommended that we eat less refined sugar, which I think is a wonderful idea if it actually had worked. People now eat more sugar than ever with their processed refined carbohydrates and all the grains that they eat. So they were recommended to, instead of eating more refined sugar and saturated fat, to eat less of those and to eat more vegetables, fruit, and grains. Now, I'm not saying that those are the problem. I don't think fruits and vegetables are a problem at all, in fact. Grains, however, I would say those can cause a lot of problems in people's diets due to the phytic acid and due to the inflammatory fatty acid content. But That's for you to decide. I'm just telling you my opinion, what I believe, what what my research has shown me. So the USDA picked up these guidelines, ran with it, and I mean, it really fits with the what the USDA does when part of their job is to sell grain. So they get to sell more grain. People get to cure their heart disease. It's a win-win situation, right? Um, yeah. If the assumptions they made were correct, it would have been a win-win situation. But unfortunately, those assumptions were wrong. And they made an ass out of you and me. They made our asses fat in the end. Because the obesity rates doubled in the United States following this. The obesity rates doubled. Cardiovascular disease is still the #1 killer in the United States. That didn't change. Cardiovascular disease rates did not go down. The deaths caused by cardiovascular disease may have decreased, but it could be argued that the incidences of deaths have decreased due to the increased availability of medical care and the increased effectiveness of the medical care, keeping people alive. Even though they got cardiovascular disease, they're being kept alive longer. So nothing changed. We decreased saturated fat. We increased polyunsaturated fats. We started eating more grains, consequently more sugar, more carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, a lot more bread and stuff. And this led to the infamous food pyramid, the Illuminati food pyramid of the 90s that everybody loves to hate. But, so yeah, intake of saturated fat is down. Obesity's up. Obesity rates have increased. Diabetes has increased. Cancer rates have increased. So, I don't know. Maybe we're doing something wrong with the diet that we're recommending through our public policy, through our government agencies, and through the media. Because it didn't work. It didn't work. So the link between cholesterol and cardiovascular disease, never been proven. Never been proven. No causation has ever been proven, and I've never seen any evidence that there is a causation there. But the cholesterol issue is also oversimplified. The small LDL particles, the small dense LDL particles, can penetrate the arterial wall and are often present when there's cardiovascular disease, but we still don't know that they're causing it. Could be more like a bandage. Could be more like a repair mechanism that the body utilizes when there's inflammation, when there's breakages in the artery, when there's damage from glycation. So we got to consider all that. We can't oversimplify things. We don't want to demonize any macronutrient. Fat's not the problem. Carbs aren't the problem. It's very specific types of fat that actually influence our health in a negative way, and very specific types of carbohydrates that can influence our health in a negative way as well. So, we don't know if cholesterol is a cause or a symptom. We don't know that. We can't make that assumption. Stop making that assumption. Cholesterol is not inherently bad. It's necessary for your body. Your body needs cholesterol to make vitamin D, one of the most important nutrients that your body can synthesize. But it needs cholesterol to do it. Cholesterol is needed to make sex steroid hormones, to make testosterone. Everybody needs testosterone, men and women. Testosterone is necessary. You need cholesterol to make testosterone. So cholesterol is not bad. Cholesterol is necessary in the body. So obviously, we may have been wrong about saturated fat being bad. Now, saturated fat can be a viable and healthy food source, especially in the context of a low carbohydrate diet. If you're going to cut out carbohydrates for whatever reason, whether it's to because it might be a sustainable way for you to diet and lose weight and cut down your body fat, or if it's for health reasons. A lot of people, most everybody's biomarkers vastly improve, including their cardiovascular health, improves on a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. So in the context of a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet, eating lots of saturated fat, I would say, is a really good thing. Saturated fat has fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients. Vitamins A, vitamin D, and vitamin K are fat-soluble vitamins, only found in fatty animal products like fish, beef liver, stuff like that. So these are necessary nutrients. Butter, another good source of vitamin K. Some aged cheeses as well. But these animal foods, these have been a part of our diet for thousands of years. We weren't getting cardiovascular disease during the development of our ancestors. Why are we getting it all of a sudden? There wasn't an increase in saturated fat intake. In fact, there was a decrease in saturated fat intake over the last 40 years, and cardiovascular disease is the same. and obesity has increased. Cancer rates have increased. So obviously it's not the problem. Now we got to be careful, especially for people who are promoting a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. We got to be careful not to make the same mistakes that people like Ansel Keys made. And that could be dangerous. We don't want to demonize carbohydrates. We can't just go out there saying, oh, carbs are the problem, carbs make you fat. That's an oversimplification, and it's just not true. Carbs don't make you fat. Eating way too many processed carbohydrates will create a hormonal environment where you will be more prone to overeating and where you will be more prone to storing body fat, but those carbs did not make you fat. You eating like a fat person made you fat. I'm sorry to say it. Eating too much makes us fat. Just carbs don't make you fat. If you can eat carbohydrates and still regulate your caloric intake and still make sure that you're not eating at a huge excess and storing a bunch of body fat, carbs are fine. In the context of a high carbohydrate diet, saturated fat is also not bad. You need fats. There's essential fats. You need fat in your diet. You don't need carbohydrates in your diet. You need fat. Now, I'm not saying everybody should eat a low carb diet. Everyone should eat a high fat diet. No, high carb diets have their place. If you can, in a sustainable way, maintain a healthy diet in your life using carbohydrates, that's great. That's fine. There's plenty of healthy carbs out there. Wouldn't recommend eating loads of grain all the time. I wouldn't recommend eating Lucky Charms for breakfast every day. But in the context of a low carbohydrate diet, saturated fat is great. You can eat a lot of it. There's nothing wrong with it. And demonizing any macronutrient is not going to help your cause, no matter what your cause is. Don't demonize macronutrients. There's nothing wrong with carbs. There's nothing wrong with fat. Saturated fat is great when taken in context, just like any other nutrient. Everything's got to be taken into context. Don't jump to conclusions. You can't make assumptions about causation. And so to finish off, I want to leave you with this one statistic, which I think is really important, which I find freaking profound. And think of the implications of this. 1/3 of all pharmaceutical company profits today, that's 1/3 of all pharmaceutical company profits, one of the most profitable industries in the world, one of the largest industries in the United States and in the world, 1/3 of their profits comes from prescribing statins, cholesterol-lowering drugs. This is a direct result of the demonization of cholesterol. Now, the level of cholesterol considered safe and healthy, the level of serum cholesterol has been gradually lowered over the years. It's been drastically lowered, which has led to the increase in the prescription of statins, which is 1/3 of pharmaceutical companies' profits. Now, correlation doesn't imply causation, but I'm going to leave you with that little stat. Ignorance is a really profitable state. An ignorant populace is highly profitable. Not for themselves, for other people who are not ignorant. So, yeah, think about the implications there. Take a balanced approach to it. Fat's not the enemy. Saturated fat isn't causing all the problems in the world, and neither are carbohydrates. So don't make the same mistake. Don't let history repeat itself. Let's not make assumptions that there's only one way to do things. There's many different ways to skin a rabbit, or to, if you're a vegan, to peel an orange. So, yep, have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your life. Stay focused on your goals. And, yeah, don't demonize macronutrients. They're not the problem.